HOA stole my plane, so I dropped feed on their picnic. Hey, you won't believe the insanity I'm about to drop on you, literally. Imagine this. An HOA so nuts they towed my plane, my actual plane, right out of my yard. All because their clipboard queen, Karen, hated it. But here's the kicker. I got revenge by buzzing their fancy picnic and unloading 50 pounds of chicken feed on her cardboard clone. Stick around to see how I turned their perfect day into pure chaos. It's wild. Hit that like button if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare. Drop a comment with your craziest Karen story, and smash subscribe so you don't miss more epic battles like this. Let's dive in. It was a sight that'd make any pilot's blood boil. My single-engine Cessna, my pride and joy, dangling from a crane like a kid's toy caught in a claw machine, swinging over my backyard fence while Karen, the HOA president, sat smugly in her golf cart, sipping a Diet Coke like she'd just checkmated me in chess. I wasn't even there to stop it. I was 200 miles away, flying emergency supplies to a rural clinic through a storm so nasty I'd nearly kissed the windshield in relief when I landed. When I finally dragged myself back to Pinewood Estates 3 days later, my plane was gone. The grass was torn up, the tarp I'd left on it was shredded, and in its place sat a $1,200 towing bill and a handwritten note from Karen that read, "Perhaps now you'll trim those hedges." That's when I knew this wasn't some petty neighbor spat. This was war, and I had wings to fight it with. Let me take you back a bit so you get the whole picture. My name's Tom, not my real name for this story, because YouTube's got rules, and I live in Pinewood Estates, a sprawling suburban patch about an hour outside the city. Big lots, open fields, skies so wide you can taste the freedom. I found this place 5 years ago, back when I was still flying training runs for a local flight school. I'd been up in a rickety old trainer, buzzing over the countryside, when I spotted it. A little house with a flat, grassy acre out back, perfect for a private airstrip. I remember banking low, the sun glinting off the roof, and thinking, that's home. Took me 6 months to convince the county it wasn't crazy. Meetings with a grumpy clerk named Ed who kept saying, "A plane? In a backyard?" But I wore him down with blueprints, FAA regs, and a promise not to buzz the town hall. Finally, he stamped the permit, muttering, "Don't crash into my car." I moved in a week later. I'm a licensed pilot, ex-Air Force, and now I freelance, supply drops, medevac runs, whatever keeps me airborne. That Cessna isn't a weekend hobby, it's my lifeline. Back in the service, I flew choppers through dust storms and gunfire, pulling guys out of places no one should have been. Now, I use those skills to haul medical kits to flood zones or food to wildfire crews. The FAA signed off on my strip, the county gave me the green light, and for years, it was smooth sailing. Neighbors waved when I took off, kids ran out to watch, and old Mrs. Jenkins down the street even asked me to drop cat food for her feral colony once. True story. Then Karen showed up, and the skies got stormy. Karen's the HOA president, and if you're picturing a mid-50s control freak in yoga pants she's never stretched in, armed with a smartphone she uses to snap pics of every violation she can dream up, you're dead on. She's been running Pinewood for 6 years, mostly because no one else wants the gig. I've heard stories, like the time she fined a guy for leaving his Christmas tree up till January 2nd, or when she went door to door with a ruler to measure grass height, claiming anything over 3 inches was an affront to decency. She's got this clipboard she carries like a scepter, and those oversized sunglasses that scream, "I'm watching you." At first, she was subtle with me, a note on my mailbox whining, "Aircraft noise disrupts our peaceful evenings." Then an email, "Your landing strip violates aesthetic standards." I ignored them. I fly maybe 3 times a week, always daylight, with noise dampeners on the engine. I even reroute takeoffs to avoid Jenkins' cats. But Karen didn't care about facts. To her, my plane wasn't a tool or a passion. It was a giant screw you to her little kingdom. Things hit a boiling point at an HOA meeting last spring. I usually skip those snooze fests. 2 hours of arguing over mailbox colors or whether petunias are approved flora isn't my idea of fun. But my buddy Pete, a quiet guy who keeps his lawn mower in military precision, tipped me off. "Karen's got the airplane problem on the agenda," he said over beers the night before. "She's gunning for you." So I showed up, leaning against the back wall of the clubhouse, arms crossed, while the room filled with the usual suspects. There was Linda, a sweet lady who knits during meetings but rolls her eyes at Karen's rants. Bill, an old-timer who naps through every vote. Jenny, a young mom who wants change but never speaks up. And then Karen, strutting in with her tablet like she was about to deliver the State of the Union. The air smelled like stale coffee and cheap air freshener, the kind that makes you sneeze. Chairs squeaked as folks settled in, whispering about the big issue. Karen tapped her mic. Feedback screeched through the room and launched into it. "We have an unauthorized aircraft invading our airspace," she said, voice quivering with fake drama. "It's loud, it's dangerous, and we don't know what it's doing up there. Could be dropping trash, spying on our kids, who knows?" The room buzzed. Linda dropped a stitch, Bill snorted awake, and Jenny shrank in her seat. I stepped forward, keeping my cool. "Karen, it's me. I fly that plane. It's FAA approved, and last month I used it to deliver medical kits to a flood zone. Saved 3 families from drowning." She blinked, caught off guard, then smirked. "This isn't a runway for your ego, Tom. We're a community, not an airfield." A few folks chuckled, her loyalists, the ones who nod at every citation she hands out. But I saw Pete grin, and Linda gave me a thumbs up behind her yarn. I thought I'd won that round, maybe embarrassed her enough to back off. Nope. She'd been needling me for months before that. Anonymous letters about fuel smells, blurry photos of my strip mailed to the HOA board. Even a rumor she started that I was scaring the birds. Once, I tried playing nice, invited her over to see the Cessna, explain how it works. She showed up, took one look, and said, "This isn't a neighborhood, it's a war zone." Then she left, and the next day, I got a citation for unapproved machinery. After the meeting, it got worse. Pete overheard her at the grocery store, bragging to her cronies, "I'll ground him if it's the last thing I do." That's when I knew she wasn't just annoyed. She was obsessed. The moment I found that invoice in my mailbox, my brain short-circuited. My Cessna, my lifeline, my freedom, had been towed like some beat-up jalopy, and Karen, that HOA dictator with a clipboard, had the gall to bill me $1,200 for it. I'd just stumbled home after 3 grueling days hauling supplies to a wildfire outpost, still reeking of smoke and sweat, expecting to collapse into bed. Instead, I was staring at an empty airstrip, the tarp in tatters, grass gouged by tire tracks, and a crumpled flyer for the HOA's spring cleanup day mocking me from the ground. I thought it had been stolen. My hand was halfway to dialing 911, until that Skylift recovery invoice hit me like a slap. Authorized by HOA President Karen. It said, for code violations. She'd turned my plane into a neighborhood nuisance and charged me for the privilege. I laughed, a wild, unhinged cackle that sent Rusty, my scruffy mutt, bolting behind the garage. Karen had no idea the hornet's nest she'd just kicked. First call went to the FAA. The agent, a guy named Greg with a voice like he'd smoked a pack a day since '85, snorted so hard he coughed. "They did what?" he wheezed. "Towed an aircraft? From private property? Send me everything, photos, invoice, all of it." I snapped pics of the empty strip, the shredded tarp, the tire marks, and emailed them over, still shaking my head. Next up was Mike, my old Air Force buddy turned aviation lawyer. Mike's the kind of guy who'd argue with a tornado and win. He lives for legal chaos. I scanned him the invoice, and he called back in 20 minutes, voice dripping with glee. "She's toast, Tom. This is private property tampering, plus an FAA Part 91 violation. Civilians can't touch an aircraft without federal clearance. I'll file complaints with the FAA and the county. Give me 48 hours to bury her in paperwork." I could hear him cracking his knuckles through the phone. "Oh, and don't do anything stupid till I say so," he added. Too late. "Mike." My brain was already spinning. While Mike worked his magic, I couldn't sit still. That plane wasn't just metal and wings. It was every mission I'd flown, every life I'd helped, every dream I'd chased since I was a kid watching jets streak over my grandpa's farm. I had to get it back now. Skylift recovery was 50 miles away, out past the edge of town where the suburbs fade into cow country. I grabbed my keys, a thermos of coffee strong enough to wake a coma patient, and hit the road. The drive was a nightmare from the jump. Twisting back roads slick with mud from a morning rain, my truck's wipers smearing more than they cleared. 10 minutes in, the GPS glitched, barking turn left into a ditch. I cursed, pulled over, and saw a deer dart across the road, its eyes glinting in my headlights like it knew I was on a mission. Yeah, laugh it up, I muttered, wrestling the map app back to life. Halfway there, I stopped at a dingy gas station, the kind with a flickering neon sign and a bathroom you wouldn't touch with a hazmat suit. I needed gas and a break. My hands were still shaking from adrenaline and caffeine. Inside, an old guy in a trucker hat leaned on the counter, chewing a toothpick. He clocked my flight jacket and grinned. "You the plane guy?" he asked. I blinked. Maybe." He chuckled. "Heard about an HOA towing one last week. Same thing happened to me with my rig. Parked it 2 hours past their limit, and they hauled it. Fought him in court and won. Don't let those clipboard Nazis grind you down, kid." His name was Earl, a retired hauler with a handshake like a vice. "Make him regret it," he said, slapping a free coffee refill in my hand. I drove off with his words ringing in my ears, a little fire stoked in my gut. Skylift Recovery was a dusty junkyard masquerading as a business. Rusted crop dusters slumped against chain-link fences, a busted ultralight with Fly-Me spray painted on the side, and a helicopter carcass with "Karen was here" scratched into the tail, probably some poor soul's revenge graffiti. My Cessna sat in the middle, parked between a drone that looked like it had lost a fight with a lawnmower and a pile of twisted scrap metal. Dust coated the wings, and the tie-down ropes were a mess, sloppy knots that'd make any pilot wince. The manager, Dave, shuffled out of a tin-roofed office, wiping sweat off his brow with a rag. He was a wiry guy, mid-40s, with the nervous energy of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. "We don't usually do this," he muttered, avoiding my eyes. "They said it was abandoned, a fire hazard. Some HOA lady lit up my phone for half an hour straight." "Who's they?" I asked, though I already knew. He pulled up the work order on a cracked tablet. HOA letterhead, Karen's signature in bold Sharpie, like she'd pressed so hard it'd tear the paper. "She yelled till I couldn't say no," Dave admitted. "Threatened to sue, report us to the county, you name it. Said it was for the community." He shrugged, guilty but trapped. I could see it. He was a small-timer, probably scraping by, and Karen had him by the throat. "Look," I said, softening my tone. "I'm not here to bust your chops. Just help me get my bird back." His shoulders relaxed, and he nodded. "Yeah, okay. Sign here. And, pro tip, lock it to the ground next time. They hate that." He smirked, and I liked him instantly. Seeing my plane like that, grounded, disrespected, flipped a switch in me. This wasn't just about rules anymore. It was personal. Karen hadn't just towed my Cessna. She tried to clip my wings, turn me into the neighborhood punchline. I spent an hour untangling the ropes. Amateur hour. They'd looped them wrong, risking damage to the landing gear. Rain started up again, a cold drizzle that soaked my jacket as I checked every inch. Prop, fuel lines, controls. The oil cap was loose, dripping just enough to make me grit my teeth. Had they even moved it right? I wiped it down, tightened it, and muttered, "Hang in there, girl. We're going home." Dave watched from the office, probably glad I wasn't yelling at him. Then he dropped a bomb. "Oh, heads up," he said, poking his head out. "That lady? She called an hour ago, asked if you'd picked it up yet. Said if you didn't by 5, she's filing something with the FAA, public safety risk, or some crap." I checked my watch, 4:15. 45 minutes to beat her clock. My pulse kicked up. Was she bluffing? Maybe, but I wasn't risking it. I fired up the engine, the familiar rumble cutting through the drizzle like a war cry. Takeoff was dicey, soggy ground, low visibility, Swangmu rolling in from the fields. I held my breath, eased the throttle, and lifted off, the junkyard shrinking below me. For a second, I swore I saw a white golf cart idling on the road nearby. Karen, watching? Nah, just a delivery van. Still, it stuck with me, a paranoid itch I couldn't scratch. The flight home was pure freedom, wind whipping through the open vent, the hum of the engine washing away 3 days of grime and a fresh dose of rage. I banked over Pinewood Estates, the rooftops glowing in the late afternoon sun, and landed smooth as butter on my strip. Rusty bounded out, tail wagging like I'd been gone a year. I shut her down, patted the wing, and whispered, "We're back." But as I locked the hangar, that itch flared again. Karen wasn't done. She'd made this a game, and I was done playing defense. Whatever she had up her sleeve, I'd be ready. And maybe, just maybe, I'd give her a taste of the sky she'd tried to steal. I'd barely shut the hangar door after getting my Cessna back when the adrenaline crashed and the reality sank in. Karen hadn't just towed my plane. She'd declared war, and I wasn't about to let her strut around Pinewood Estates thinking she'd won. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was dead quiet except for Rusty's snores from his spot by the couch, but my brain was a tornado, replaying the empty strip, that smug invoice, Dave's warning about her FA threat. I paced the living room, the hardwood creaking under my boots, and kept picturing her in that golf cart, sipping her Diet Coke like some suburban Caesar. Rusty cracked an eye open, tilting his head like, "You good, boss?" I wasn't. I needed to hit back, not just to save face, but to remind her that some people don't bow to clipboards. The question was how. I flopped onto the couch, grabbed my laptop, and started scrolling. Farm supply sites, aviation forums, even a sketchy revenge ideas thread where some guy swore by glitter bombs. Tempting, but I'd be cleaning sparkles out of the Cessna for years. Then I found it. A used grain hopper for small aircraft, a metal bucket with a remote release hatch, built for seeding fields. It was listed on a rural classified site, $150, lightly used, works great. I could rig it under the wing, load it up, and drop something on Karen's perfect little world. Not dangerous, not illegal, just messy enough to make a point. The seller was an hour away, a farmer named Hank in some nowhere town called Dusty Hollow. I shot him a message at 2 a.m. Still available? Can I grab it tomorrow? He replied 5 minutes later. Yup. Bring cash. Farmers don't sleep, apparently. Next morning, I hit the road at dawn, Rusty riding shotgun in the truck, his nose pressed to the window like he knew we were up to something. The drive to Dusty Hollow was a trip through time, past crumbling barns, fields of knee-high corn, and a rusted sign that read, "Welcome to Nowhere, population, us." Hank's place was a sprawl of chaos, chickens clucking everywhere, a tractor missing a wheel, and a stench of manure so thick I could taste it. He met me by a sagging porch, a wiry old guy in overalls with a grin full of crooked teeth. The hopper leaned against a shed, dented but solid, about the size of a big cooler. "This ain't for crops, is it?" he asked, squinting at me. I grinned back. "Special delivery." He cackled, a raspy laugh that shook his whole frame, and slapped the bucket. Used it once to teach a land shark a lesson. Dropped cow pies on his shiny Beamer. Worked like a charm. He dragged it over, then tossed in a 50-pound bag of chicken feed. Dusty, smelly, perfect. "On the house," he said. "Make it epic, son." Back home, I turned the garage into a mad scientist's lab. Rigging the hopper was no picnic. Bolting it under the Cessna's wing took a socket wrench, a lot of swearing, and 3 hours of trial and error. I wired the release to a switch in the cockpit, running cables through the fuselage like I was hot wiring a car. Rusty watched from his blanket, chewing an old tennis ball, probably wondering why I was muttering, "Take that, Karen," every 5 minutes. I tested it in the backyard with sandbags. First drop missed by 20 feet, splattering my truck's windshield. "Great start," I groaned, wiping it off. Second try, Rusty thought it was playtime and dove into the pile, emerging with sand caked on his snout. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the wrench. Third time, the hatch jammed, stuck tight. I climbed under the wing, banged it with a hammer till it popped, and sand rained down on my head. "Perfect," I coughed, spitting grit. By dusk, it worked. Clean drops, dead center on a chalk X I'd drawn in the grass. I called Mike to double-check the legal side. "As long as it's biodegradable and doesn't hit anyone, you're in the clear," he said, chuckling. "FAA won't care if it's agricultural testing. But don't tell me the target. I want to plead ignorance when it hits the fan." He paused. "And Tom, make it good." I hung up, grinning like a kid with a slingshot. The plan was taking shape. The HOA's annual picnic was Saturday, a big outdoor shindig with potluck tables, speeches, and a VIP, Councilman Roberts, who Karen was schmoozing for a city planning gig. Pete, my neighbor with the military-grade lawnmower, dropped a gold nugget over beers Friday night. "She's got a life-size cutout of herself for photos," he said, smirking. "Cardboard, Karen, clipboard and all. Thought you'd like that." Oh, I did. New target acquired. Hit the cutout, not the crowd. Precision over chaos. Pete showed up at my place that night, a roll of cardboard under his arm and a gleam in his eye. "Let's make a practice dummy," he said. We raided my recycling bin, Amazon boxes, duct tape, a Sharpie, and built a mock cardboard Karen in the garage. Pete went overboard, sketching her smirk, adding oversized sunglasses, even taping a tiny clipboard to her hand. Needs sound, he said, rigging a cheap Bluetooth speaker to play a loop of "This is a violation" in a shrill Karen impression. I vetoed it. Too much hassle, but we laughed till our sides hurt testing it. We set her up in the yard, and I ran drops with the hopper till midnight. First try, sand flattened her. Second, Rusty tackled the remains. By the 10th, I had it dialed. 50 pounds of chicken feed would turn that cutout into a dusty memory. But then I hit a wall. Staring at the Cessna under the garage lights, hopper gleaming like a weapon, I froze. My mom's voice echoed in my head. "Don't fight anger with anger, Tommy. Rise above it." She'd said that after I got in a fist fight over a stolen bike at 12. Wise words from a woman who'd raised me solo after Dad bailed. Was this worth it? I'd gotten the plane back. Mike was handling the legal mess. Maybe I should let it go. I slumped against the workbench, Rusty nudging my leg with his wet nose. "What do you think, bud?" I asked. He woofed, tail wagging. Then my phone pinged. An email from Karen, CC to the entire HOA. Due to ongoing violations by a certain resident, we're pursuing legal action to ensure community safety. Expect updates. My jaw clenched. She wasn't backing off. She was doubling down. Mom's advice faded, drowned out by that smug "expect updates." This wasn't anger anymore. It was justice. Friday night brought a curveball. Pete called, out of breath. "Just saw a guy snooping around your place. Skinny dude with a camera, ducked into a black sedan," when I yelled. My stomach dropped. Karen had hired someone, a PI maybe? To catch me what, flying? I checked the garage, hopper still there, but I wasn't taking chances. I grabbed a can of green spray paint from the shelf, a leftover from painting Rusty's doghouse, and went to work. By midnight, the hopper looked like a clunky irrigation tool, ugly, but it'd pass a quick glance. Pete swung by to inspect it. "Genius," he said, then smirked. "She's gonna flip when she sees what's coming." I nodded, the plan locked in. Karen wanted a fight? She'd get one, 500 feet up, with a bucket of chicken feed and a point to prove. Saturday morning broke over Pinewood Estates like a postcard. Clear skies, a crisp breeze rustling the trees, and the faintest hint of barbecue smoke drifting from the park across the street. It was the day of the HOA's annual picnic, Karen's big stage to strut her stuff, and my shot to drop a literal payload on her parade. I'd barely slept, wired from adrenaline and the late-night paint job on the hopper, but I was ready. I rolled out of bed at dawn, threw on my flight jacket, and headed to the garage. The Cessna sat there, gleaming under the fluorescent lights, the hopper rigged and camouflaged as an irrigation tool. A lumpy, green monstrosity that'd fool anyone who didn't look too close. Rusty bounded in, tail wagging like a metronome, sniffing the plane like he knew today was game day. "You're my co-pilot, bud," I said, scratching his ears. He woofed, and I took it as a yes. First things first, a full pre-flight check. I crawled under the wing, double-checking the hopper's bolts, tight as a drum. The release switch in the cockpit clicked smoothly, the cables snug. I ran my hands over the prop, the fuel lines, every rivet, whispering, "Don't let me down, girl." In the cockpit, I pulled out a faded photo of my folks, taped to the dash from my first solo flight years ago. Mom beaming, Dad in his old Air Force cap. "This is for freedom, not hate." I muttered, half to them, half to myself. Karen had pushed me to this, but I wasn't about to lose who I was over her. I loaded the hopper with Hank's chicken feed, 50 pounds of dusty, pungent glory, locked it shut, and stepped back. Showtime. From my porch, thermos of coffee in hand, I watched the picnic take shape. Folding chairs sprouted like mushrooms across the park lawn, red checkered tablecloths flapping in the breeze. The smell of grilling burgers and Linda's famous potato salad wafted over, mingling with the faint buzz of a Bluetooth speaker playing some generic country tune. Kids darted around, kicking a soccer ball, while Bill dozed in a lawn chair, his fishing hat tipped over his eyes. Jenny chased her toddler, who'd smeared ketchup on his face like war paint. And then there was Karen, strutting in a pastel blazer that screamed, "I'm in charge," barking orders at volunteers. "No. The banner goes higher. The napkins are uneven." She'd set up a podium with a mic, a banner overhead reading, "Pinewood Pride Picnic." And best of all, cardboard Karen, her life-size cutout, propped off to the side. Clipboard in hand, smirk plastered on. It was a perfect paper tyrant, ready for its close-up with Councilman Roberts, who'd just rolled up in a crisp suit, shaking hands like he was running for office. I waited, timing it just right. The crowd settled into their seats, about 50 folks total, HOA loyalists, fence-sitters, and a few like Pete who'd secretly cheered me on. Karen tapped the mic, feedback screeching through the park, and launched into her speech. "Welcome, everyone, to a celebration of our community's unity," she crowed, voice dripping with fake warmth. "We're building a better tomorrow, and with leaders like Councilman Roberts here, we'll show the world what Pinewood stands for: order, safety, pride." The councilman nodded, adjusting his tie, while a smattering of applause rippled through. That was my cue. I slipped back to the hangar, Rusty trotting behind, and fired up the Cessna. The engine roared to life, a deep, satisfying growl that vibrated through my bones. I taxied to the strip, the hopper rattling slightly under the wing, 50 pounds of justice locked and loaded. Takeoff was smooth, the plane lifting off like it knew the stakes. I climbed to 500 feet, the park shrinking below me into a toy set. Neat rows of chairs, the red checkered tables, Karen waving her arms like a wannabe conductor. The wind picked up, a stiff gust rocking the wings. I gripped the yoke, heart pounding. Too much turbulence, and the drop could go wide. "Stay with me," I muttered, adjusting the flaps. I circled once, locking the GPS on cardboard Karen, her paper smirk glinting in the sun. The real Karen was mid-sentence. "We must protect our values." When I lined up the shot, my thumb hovered over the release switch, a bead of sweat trickling down my neck. One last breath, then I flipped it. The hopper clanked open with a metallic groan, and 50 pounds of chicken feed poured out, catching the breeze like a golden avalanche. Time slowed, dust swirled, grains shimmered, and for a split second, I thought it'd miss. Then it hit, a direct bullseye on cardboard Karen. The cutout buckled, folding in half as feed exploded outward in a glorious, smelly cloud. Bits rained down, dusting the nearest tables. Linda's potato salad took a direct hit, turning into a gritty mash. Screams erupted below. Karen shrieked, "My blazer!" Her pastel masterpiece now speckled with feed, like a Jackson Pollock painting gone wrong. The councilman dove under a table, clutching a napkin over his head like it'd save him from the apocalypse. Linda doubled over laughing, clutching her sides, while Bill jolted awake, yelling, "What in tarnation? Bird attack!" Jenny's kid clapped, shouting, "The chickens are mad!" Pete, standing by the grill, pumped a fist and mouthed, "Yes." Chaos reigned. Chairs toppled as folks scrambled, some covering their noses, others pointing at the sky. Feed settled in a haze, the cutout a crumpled heap, its clipboard arms sticking up like a surrender flag. Karen flailed, her hair a mess, screaming, "Who did this?" As if she didn't know. I banked left, slow and deliberate, letting them all get a good look at my tail number. Legal enough to dodge trouble, smug enough to sear it into her brain. From up there, it was almost beautiful, a dusty masterpiece of payback. I couldn't hear the full meltdown, but I caught Karen's banshee wail over the engine, and that was enough. I turned for home, grinning like a fool, the Cessna purring like it was proud too. I landed smooth as silk, cutting the engine just as Rusty raced out, barking like he'd won the lottery. I hopped out, patted the wing, and said, "Good girl." The picnic was still visible across the street, people milling, Karen waving her arms, the councilman brushing feed off his suit like a disgraced dignitary. I grabbed my phone, expecting Mike's call any second, and leaned against the hangar, catching my breath. It had gone off without a hitch. Well, mostly. A tiny voice in my head whispered, "You're in for it now," but I shoved it down. Karen had towed my plane, threatened my freedom, and paraded her power like a crown. This wasn't just revenge, it was a wake-up call, delivered from 500 feet with a bucket of chicken feed. Whatever came next, I was ready, and I had a feeling the neighborhood was too. I'd barely shut off the engine when Mike called. "You're viral, man." Some teen posted it, 50,000 views in an hour. They're calling it the feed storm. I pulled up YouTube. There it was, slow-mo feed raining down, Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries blaring. Karen flailed, feed in her hair. The councilman looked like he'd seen a ghost. Comments rolled in. Captain Feed strikes again. HOA got served. Pete banged on my door 10 minutes later, phone in hand. You're a legend, he said. Linda showed up with cookies, giggling. I haven't laughed that hard since '92. Karen fought back hard. That night, 2 cops knocked, looking exhausted. Aerial assault complaint. One said, eyeing the Cessna. I invited them in, showed the flight log, FAA permit, GoPro footage, feed hitting cardboard, not people. It's biodegradable, I said. They smirked. Legal, barely, they admitted. She's livid, called dispatch 10 times. They left with Mike's card and a don't do it again shrug. By Monday, the video hit 1 million views. Karen sent mass emails demanding my expulsion, filed a city complaint, held a driveway press conference. Local news showed up, and she wailed, he's a winged terrorist. Teens trolled her, dropping confetti from a roof mid-speech. She looked like a drowned rat in a blazer. The tide turned fast. At the next HOA meeting, Linda stood up. Karen fined my cat for loitering. I'm done. Jenny added. She made my kid cry over a chalk drawing. They voted her out, 8-2. She stormed off, vowing lawsuits, but no one cared. Steve, a chill retiree, took over and asked me to advise on airspace rules. I said yes, if they ditched hedge height citations. He laughed. Deal. A month later, the FAA sent a plaque for creative community outreach from above. A note read, next time, confetti. I hung it in the hangar beside a still of cardboard Karen mid-collapse. Pinewood changed. Kids drew on streets. Pete built a playground. Linda's cat roamed free. I got invited to a pilot's conference, told the story to a roaring crowd. Fan mail poured in. A pilot thanked me for standing up. A mom said her HOA backed off after the feed storm. The Cessna's a local icon now. Kids wave. Pete painted "Fly Free" on his fence. Karen moved to a gated condo, leaving a "You don't deserve me" note. Every takeoff, I circle the neighborhood, a reminder, when tyrants push, sometimes you push back, from 500 feet up, with a bucket and a grin. And there you have it. Karen towed my plane. So I turned her picnic into a feed-flying fiasco she'll never forget. But here's the real takeaway. Sometimes, when petty tyrants try to ground you, literally or figuratively, you've got to rise up, not with anger, but with something bolder, something they can't ignore. For me, it was 50 pounds of chicken feed from 500 feet. For you, it might be standing up in your own way. Freedom's worth fighting for, right? If this story made you laugh, gasp, or cheer, smash that like button. It means the world. Drop a comment. What's your wildest HOA horror story? And if you loved watching Karen get her comeuppance, subscribe to HOA Karen Files. We've got more tales of clipboard chaos coming your way. Hit that bell so you never miss a drop. Pun intended. See you in the next one.